Hi everybody, Luke Filmboss here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Jurassic World Dominion. I'm going to start by talking about the characters, Owen, Claire, and the latest member, latest installment, Maisie. I really like their characters in this Jurassic World franchise. They are definitely the reason that I came to this movie, and they all get some pretty good emotional moments. Very few and far between, though. There wasn't much in terms of really strong emotional moments, but the really, really strong ones that we do get lean heavily on the relationship between Owen and the raptor Blue, and that's because the previous film built up that relationship and showed us that relationship. And so when seeing it in this movie, although Blue really isn't in this movie very much, when you see her and Owen at the end, there's this really good moment that just really made me feel, and it's like that is why I came to this movie. It wasn't quite enough of that though, but I like those characters. And then of course we have the legacy characters, as we saw in the trailer, the returning cast from the original Jurassic Park movies. I was never very invested in those characters. They were kind of just like good vessels that got us through the movies. The first Jurassic Park was really great, and the characters just worked there. I'd say that Alan Grant is the one that I got most connected to, and he has a decent role to play in this movie. He shouldn't be in the movie. Really, none of the legacy characters should be, because the way that the movie shoehorns them in is very just bad and unnecessary. I wish it would have been done differently, but they're here, and with Alan Grant, they make the most of it. And then you have Malcolm, and he's just hilarious. His inclusion in the movie is worthwhile, just because he kind of gives this movie this interesting humor dynamic, but also his dynamic of viewpoints kind of clashes with Owen, and it's very fun to see. And then you have Ellie, or whatever the girl's name was from the original Jurassic Park film, and she's basic and generic. She really shouldn't be in this movie, but she is, and they give her a role to play, and she does what you would expect. She's harmless in this movie. She didn't do anything, like her character wasn't offensive to the franchise or to this film. It didn't ruin her inclusion in the previous trilogy, but her inclusion in this movie just kind of feels forced and unorganic, and she just has really nothing interesting about her character, whereas Alan Grant does have at least something. And then we have our new characters. I'd say the strongest character out of these new ones would be the pilot lady, and she's got basic motivations. It's kind of just like, I should have done something, and so now I'm going to make up for that. So yeah, she was okay. And then you have the villain, who is just this boring, basic, generic businessman who runs this billion-dollar company, and his whole connection to the dinosaurs and everything that's going on is he just wants to make more money. Isn't that just like the best way to conclude your Jurassic World franchise, by giving us this giant corporation run by this basic blank slate of a guy who's trying to make money off of them again? Yeah, he was just a bad character in general. And then there's this other character who's kind of like his partner slash mentoree, who he's building up to be the next owner or next manager of the company. And that character had some good moments. I didn't really care what happened to him, to be honest. He could have got chomped by a dinosaur, and I wouldn't have really cared either way. And I just have to say, he had this younger character, I just have to say, had some weird moments, especially towards the end. He has this interaction with the main villain, and I didn't understand what the point of it was in the movie, or what was the character even doing. Like, if you watch it, you probably would know what I'm talking about. And if I was doing a non-spoiler spoiler review, I would pretty much describe what happened, but it's just kind of strange. So new characters weren't the best. They were just kind of there to drive the plot, even if the storytellers kind of shoehorned them in a very boring, bad way. So as far as characters go, the Jurassic World characters, pretty good. The returning characters, unnecessary but fun. And then the new characters just are downright bad. Save for the one pilot lady who's just passable and serves her purpose in the story. So as far as the visuals go, visual effects, practical effects, the cinematography, it was a mixed bag. The first half of the film is just pretty basic, nothing bad, nothing great. There was this, I like some of the locations that they went to, but it wasn't overly stylized. It was just kind of seeing dinosaurs on the screen, which was it. We've seen it before. It was still fun in context of setting up what's going to come. And there was like this one action scene, which I'd say is the worst one. It takes place earlier in the film, like not quite halfway, but it's quite a bit in. It's in the first half somewhere, but I thought I was kind of disappointed because I thought in the trailer that it would look really cool, and when I watched it, it's like it kind of has this fast-paced fun to it, but it's also just really like they had so many close-ups that it kind of shakes and you can't really get a real grasp on what's going on. And maybe it was made to look like that. Maybe it would like give you more of a realistic feel of what it would be like to be chased by raptors. But overall, when they did give us like a wide shot, I'm like, why couldn't we have just gotten more of these like long shots, like to see the action? Like, yeah, a few close-ups, maybe not this close-up. It just didn't look good to me and kind of just made me, it kind of felt dull. I thought it just felt off and kind of just felt out of place and unfocused. But then we got to the second half, and I'd say it's some of the best dinosaur action stuff that we've gotten, or at least unique. Maybe I can't say it's the best, because quite frankly, I thought Fallen Kingdom had some really good action set pieces with the volcano, the mansion, the Indoraptor, all that stuff. That stuff was, I loved the first, or I loved Fallen Kingdom. I thought they did very, very, very solid with the visuals. It's one of the best visual installments, easily, of the Jurassic Park / World franchise. And this installment, like I said, it had some very basic cinematography, some basic effects, some kind of choppy, kind of ugly / decent action in the first half that kind of just made me feel a little bit off. But then once it gets to the second half, those scenes with the dinosaurs, that's what carries this movie, is the visual style that the director put into some of these sequences. There were some sequences that just are just intimidating. The dinosaurs feel big and intimidating, or some scenes they're just very, very creepy and it's dark, and then you get things of light and you see the dinosaur's face, and it really makes this really creepy horror atmosphere that I just kind of loved about this film. And then there was just other, like, there's so many different dinosaurs scattered throughout the second half. It's definitely trying to be this really big dinosaur conclusion, and that's what it is. It's our characters trying to survive multiple dinosaur attacks that are done very uniquely, visually and just creatively, in the choices of what dinosaurs they use and how they filmed each scene. And so, while the first half wasn't great and definitely had its bad moments, the second half, although it's not entirely perfect and there is some generic scenes where we're just inside the business facility doing nothing but talking, the dinosaur scenes in the second half, though, are spot on and make the movie worth the watch. So visuals, it takes a while to get there, but they get really good. Now it's time to talk about the story, and this is where the movie kind of just falls flat. On one hand, you have our Jurassic World characters, Owen, Claire, and Maisie, And you have this story where Maisie and Blue's baby get kidnapped by these poachers. And so Owen and Claire have to go into the dinosaur black market and the criminal underworld of dinosaur trading and all this stuff. And that the concept of that is really cool. And I thought that was a very solid way to bring the story in. Maybe it doesn't seem quite as large scale as the filmmakers wanted, but it would have made for a very compelling story. And then on the other hand, we have our legacy characters who are trying to stop biotech, which is this big giant $1 billion generic company that wasn't referenced or anything in the previous two movies. It's kind of just there now. They're the biggest name in the business, and they've got Dr. Henry Wu working for them and doing his genetic stuff again. He's still making weird genetic things that are harmful to people, and he's doing that even though I thought he kind of was like changing that. I don't know. He seemed like he was regretting it, but he's back in here. He's working for biotech now. And so you have our legacy characters trying to stop biotech because biotech had Dr. Henry. They had him make some giant prehistoric like locusts that are eating all the crops in the world outside of biotech's seed. And so the legacy characters going to stop them from doing this. And it's kind of just like a way to bring the legacy characters in without actually having to earn their place in the franchise. It's kind of just establishing a storyline and characters and this big corporation that had nothing to do with the franchise so far, and then it's just giving the new or the old characters a problem to solve. And so then by the time you get to the end, you realize that the poachers that kidnapped Maisie and Blue were working for biotech, and the black market is kind of run by people working for biotech, and it all just links back to biotech, which is boring and basic, generic, and cliche. It's overdone, it's overused, it's not original, and it's kind of annoying in this story. It's kind of pointless for biotech to be like this main bad guy, because first off, this movie was supposed to be Jurassic World Dominion, not Jurassic World take down biotech by going in and trying to expose the fact that they have these giant locusts. Like, it was really bad storytelling. And so essentially, by the time you get to the second half, you had all this setup that is literally we had some decent stuff in the first half. We get kind of what we're promised with the whole Dominion, like the humans and dinosaurs having to coexist, and dinosaurs being in the world, and what that kind of looks like. But they didn't do enough with it. And then by the second half, we're all at biotech, and so the entire movie from then on just takes place at biotech. It's just them trying to get to Maisie, and then they get to Maisie, and the entire movie pretty much becomes just our characters trying to survive the dinosaurs at biotech, and then trying to survive as they try to get out of biotech. It's essentially just get to biotech and get out of biotech. That's the story. But the writers probably thought they were doing something cool. They thought they were making this really massive movie, and they think that by giving us this big $1 billion corporation run by this big businessman, they think that that's the way to create a proper threat, to make it feel bigger, because this corporation has this big wildlife reserve with all these giant dinosaurs and all these multiple different locations where there's these different dinosaurs, like the mines, the amber mines, and this jungle place, and then we have biotech's facility itself, and it's like, it's not quite what we wanted. We kind of wanted to see more action that takes place in like real life settings, like maybe see what would chase scene. I mean, kind of got it in The Lost World, but a chase scene in like a big city like New York, or then actually have some more action set pieces like in the woods where Owen lives. like where his log cabin is, have more action set pieces with dinosaurs in there, or maybe go to like some mountain range or rocky place or desert dunes or something. Like, give us something creative that is kind of new. Give us new scenery. We got new dinosaurs, which is good. I like that. Like I said, visually they pulled it off, but it kind of, in the story terms, is just such a missed opportunity, and is just very lazily written, very generic, borderline, and essentially it just kind of doesn't work. The story doesn't really work at all. It makes sense enough, but in terms of especially what they were starting off with, it being a rescue mission to save Maisie, it kind of just becomes Maisie gets to biotech, escapes, and then everybody's just there trying to escape, and it just becomes a mess of a basic, generic, simple story, and it was pretty bad. And to continue about the story, that brings me to one of my biggest complaints about the story, and that is the Maisie problem. This was essentially the part of the story where they actually tried to add a little more depth to the story by retconning everything that Fallen Kingdom established. And that is why I think that in terms of the story, it just doesn't work. I'll try to explain. It doesn't, like, honestly, the writers did such a bad job of connecting it with the franchise that I don't even care about spoiling it. But if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, you can skip ahead. But essentially, the Maisie problem is that they changed Maisie's origin in an attempt to try to make it seem more, I guess, lighthearted, give her more of this sense that she knows who she is, I guess. But I thought that her story was just very compelling in Fallen Kingdom, where she was this creation of her grandfather because his grandfather lost his daughter prematurely at a young age, and then he's like, I want my daughter back, so I'm going to clone her and raise her as my granddaughter. And that was interesting because she was raised all her life thinking that she was his granddaughter, when in reality she was a clone. And then that reality is exposed to her in Fallen Kingdom, and she has to come to terms with that. And she learned and understood the fact that even though she is a clone, her life still matters. She's still a living person. She is still her own person. Although she's being it's being revealed that her life was an entire lie and everything is crumbling around her, she can still know who she is. She is alive. And that is what led to the dinosaurs getting out in the first place. Although you did have also the buyers in Fallen Kingdom who also now had the genetics to make more dinosaurs, and so that also spread, which is why at the end of Fallen Kingdom I thought that scene where she does let the dinosaurs go was so powerful, is because it's, whether it was the consensus of everybody or the world, it was personal to her, is that she couldn't let these creatures die because she's looking at them and saying, they're kind of like me. And everything about it, I loved Fallen Kingdom. I loved what they did with Maisie. I loved how the story all worked together. And then Dominion kind of retcons that. And so now Maisie, she's like struggling to find out her identity because she's a clone, and that part kind of makes sense. She's a teenager and she's like starting to second guess herself, being like, who am I really? I'm a clone. Am I even myself? And so like that was interesting. And then the way that the movie resolves that is by saying, your grandfather didn't actually create you. Your mom did, or his daughter made you to be her daughter. So she took her own DNA, gave birth to you, and then the reason she died is because she had this genetic disease or disorder, and so she restructured your genes to get rid of this disorder, and so now your entire genetic is different. So you're actually not a clone of her anymore because she changed your genetics, and it's like trying to make it seem like, oh yeah, now she is just this regular human because she was born from her mother and her mother changed her genetics, so she is entirely her own person, which I think kind of defeats the whole purpose, or at least the story in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where she was able to accept the fact that she is a person despite being a clone, because that isn't what defined her. Her actions and her life is what defined her as a person, not the fact that she had to have her own set of genes, like she had to have her own unique genes. It didn't matter if her genetics were identical to that of her grandfather's daughter, or the guy, her mother, whatever. It didn't matter, but in this movie it kind of makes it seem like it does matter, and then it sets her mother as like this great scientist lady who worked at Jurassic Park and all this stuff. It works in a sense. Like, if that's what they wanted to go with from the start, this story would have been fine. I don't think it's quite as compelling, but I think it would have worked if they would have done proper setup. But it kind of just destroys what they did in Fallen Kingdom to try to make up for, like, I guess some disappointed fans, or maybe just because they thought it was the best way to go is to make Maisie just more herself. I don't know. It's retconned in, and it's pretty just bad. And then they also use Maisie as the solution to get rid of the locusts. And then, yeah, we got all that. That part kind of gets convoluted, retconny. It's just a big old mess. And kind of just, it doesn't ruin Fallen Kingdom for me. It ruined this movie for me. And when I say it ruined the movie for me, I don't technically mean it ruined it for me. I did enjoy quite a bit of this movie, but on a storytelling front, the story was terrible, with a few decent moments in there that made me like it enough. And that kind of gets me to the ending, where my final thing I gotta say about this is unearned messages and an unearned theme, where at the end it's kind of like got Maisie's mom. It's got like this recorded message of her giving like this speech about how humans and dinosaurs have to live to coexist with each other. And I don't even know how that fits into the story, because we don't know enough about her mom to even know why humans and dinosaurs having to coexist is something she was even worried about. I don't know. It's just something she says at the end. And it doesn't really work, because although that's the movie we should have gotten, it's not the movie we got, because we didn't really spend any time really seeing the effects of what happens when dinosaurs are living in the world, like all over the world, and how humans have to adapt to that, how dinosaurs have to adapt. We get some news panels and see some stuff, like we see a giant predator smashing a camper, or we see pterodactyls nesting on a skyscraper, but we all see that from this news camera perspective, and it's only like a few minutes at the beginning and a few minutes at the end, and that doesn't work. You can't pretend like the movie was about who has dominion and learning to coexist with dinosaurs if your movie is just about going to stop this giant corporation from using locusts to control the food supply, even though it's actually going to destroy the food supply and essentially destroy the entire earth. Honestly, these locusts have more to do with the actual movie than the dinosaurs do, or the Dominion itself. And then by the end, it's trying to act like, yeah, we have to learn to coexist, but it's like, all you've done is show us our main characters almost get killed multiple times by dinosaurs that are living at a biotech like national park kind of deal. It like doesn't work right. It's not properly set up, and it just isn't earned by the end. When it tries to like preach this message to you, it doesn't work, which is funny because this movie should have worked. This movie should have been what it was promised to be. Fallen Kingdom did such a good job of establishing its own purpose, establishing its characters, establishing its emotion, its own scenery, its own action, its own suspense, everything, and it still managed to organically set up a very spectacular sequel that this movie should have been, but just wasn't. And I was so excited for this. Seeing Owen riding on a horse like a cowboy, roping dinosaurs, as silly as it might be, that's what I wanted to see. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to see our characters go to a giant facility where dinosaurs are being kept. It works enough to keep me entertained and say that this is a passable movie, but it just doesn't work in the sense that this movie works. The movie itself, I would have to say, is a bad movie. I just kind of enjoyed parts of it, and it made it worth watching for me. It's easily the worst installment. Original characters from the trilogy coming back, they're there for fun nostalgia purpose. They're fine. The story is just downright awful, with a few good moments sprinkled in there with the Jurassic World cast of Owen, Claire, and Maisie. And then we have the whole Maisie retcon thing that kind of drags this movie down further. And the whole Locust, biotech, Dr. Henry Wu, creating the Locust in the first place, just all doesn't work. But we get some good visuals and some really good stylized dinosaur suspense and action scenes. So overall, Jurassic World Dominion is a passable movie. I give it a 60% in quality, a 70% in enjoyment, for an overall score of 65%, just barely reaching that score that it needs for me to say that it was a positive experience. I give it a just barely positive review with a 65%. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help you be on the lookout for more videos from Luke Film Boss.